faced his nemesis in the Travers Stakes at Saratoga.
Alydar in August is better, stronger, tougher than I ever saw him. We go into the race, I could not have been more confident.
There was reason for confidence in the Alydar camp. Cawthon was injured, and Lafitte Pinkai was riding Affirmed in his place. The change in jockeys created a new element of tension to the rivalry.
And they're off for the lead. Shake, shake, shake on the inside, nasty and bold. Now Affirmed is on the outside with Alydar.
Cordero was riding a horse named Shake, 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 who had no shot in the world, but he was trying to help his friend Velasquez.
On the outside, Affirmed is second, going under good restraint. Then 2 lengths back, now a length and a half, Alydar in third.
Shake, Shake, Shake was carrying Affirmed out. By the time we got to the half a mile pole, Lafitte is, I would say, about the middle of the track.
Alydar is along the rail, and he's moving up along the rail. Down the backstretch, Alydar will force the issue with Affirmed on the outside.
Pinkai looks back, sees him coming, drops Affirmed right in front of Alydar. Comes this close to destroying the 2 greatest stars that racing has seen in a long time.
Alydar suddenly has dropped back very suddenly and appears to be out of the race.
It was a desperate, dangerous move that Pinkai made. It was a move made by a man in panic. He had gotten the opportunity to ride this horse, and he damn near blew it.
It's Affirmed, and he has it by a length and a half. Alydar driving, can't catch him on the outside.
No sooner had the horses passed under the wire than the track stewards convened briefly and disqualified Affirmed, giving Alydar his 3rd victory in 10 meetings.
Pinkai made that decision just like that. He wasn't thinking about the horses or the game. He was thinking about Pinkai. I can never forget that.
I didn't realize that we got so close, and I cut him off on the turn. I felt really bad. It was one of my lowest points in my career.
After what we'd seen in the Triple Crown races, that was such an unsatisfactory renewal of that rivalry.
After suffering an injury in July 1979, Alydar was retired to stud at Calumet. Affirmed lost his last 2 races of 1978, and then his first 2 as a 4-year-old. Critics were quick to wonder whether it was the horse or its rider that had lost the winning touch.
Steve Cawthon went on an unimaginable losing streak, went out to California and could not buy a winner. And all of a sudden, it's what's wrong with Cawthon?
Anyone can go on a bad streak. There are jockeys who go 0 for 80, 0 for 100 all the time. It's just nobody focuses on it.
And they began running a box every day in the racing page. Cawthon lost this many races yesterday. This is how many he's up to. He wound up losing 110 straight races out there.
One of the most difficult decisions that Lazaro Barrera and the Wolfsons ever had to make was taking Steve Cawthon off Affirmed.
Affirmed at that particular season of his 4-year-old career needed a new direction.
And no sooner do they get rid of him, and Pinkai comes in and he takes over and he starts winning everything in sight.
Winning his last 7 races, Affirmed retired on top, but the future belonged to Alydar.
Alydar killed him in the breeding shed. Alydar was one of the greats there. And if you're good in the breeding shed, you're very popular in Kentucky.
After all the miles they traveled to go through the entire Triple Crown in this heated, intense rivalry, that they would wind up in the same stallion barn. What were the chances of that?
After Alydar had already established himself, Affirmed is moved to Calumet Farm to stand stud. When Affirmed comes off the trailer, Alydar is in his stall. All of a sudden, he starts a ruckus. You can hear him, he's kind of whining and kicking around, and maybe it was coincidence, but it's almost like you again.
Affirmed was a very useful stallion, but Alydar wound up winning the last heat because he was the better stallion.
Alydar's progeny is a who's who in racing. He sired 76 stakes winners, among them 2 Kentucky Derby winners, Strike the Gold and Ali Sheba.
I've always been amused by the fact that there are some die-hard Alydar fans that think that Alydar got one up on Affirmed in the end because he had a better stud career. I always thought that horse racing was decided on the racetrack, and there was no question who was the better horse. It was then and will always be Affirmed.
Represented the culmination of everything that was good about Calumet Farm. and everything it meant to racing as an American institution.
After Lucille Markey's death in 1982, the reins of Calumet Farm were handed to J.T. Lundy, the husband of her granddaughter.
J.T. Lundy, he had been named the man to run the farm, and he was happy and excited for that opportunity. But he'd grown up on a working-class farm, and you can imagine the situation of coming out of the mailroom to run a major corporation.
The next thing you know, Calumet's winning Grade 1 races on the same day in 2 different parts of the country. So as a horseman, he did the job. But from a financial and business point of view, he just wasn't qualified.
They spent money like water and bought stallions for too much money and just generally mismanaged the place.
They started to take out bank loans, one right after the other, and used one loan to make the payments for another loan.
They had in Alydar one of the most successful stallions in the world that was standing for between $150,000 and $200,000 per mare that he was bred to. And in the course of 8 or 9 years, the fortune is gone.
On November 13th, 1990, Calumet's financial clock struck midnight.
Well, I got a call, and it was one call of panic, and said, "Come quick, Alydar's hurt himself." And I arrived on the scene. The prize animal of the farm, or the cornerstone of the farm, was standing with one leg off the ground, and it was just hanging on by skin, and he had a broken leg.
We looked at the fracture. We agreed that it was a serious fracture. It had penetrated the skin. It's not as if a horse with that injury has never been saved before, but the percentages are very low.
But this was Alydar, and however slim the chances, a veterinary team worked to save the leg.
Once we got the plate in, the pins in, the cast put on, we took him to the recovery stall, and we slipped a hoist under him, something that was hooked to a hydraulic lift in the ceiling.
The next morning he looked fine, except for the fact that he was becoming somewhat apprehensive in the sling. So we basically made the decision to take him out of the sling.
Once we took him out of the sling, he was terrific. He relaxed, he dropped his head, began to eat again.
JT is just tickled to death. He's thinks, well, we're not going to lose any breeding time.
Then, in an instant, tragedy returned with deadly force.
Turned around and was able to see him go forward, and heard the crack that indicated that he had broken another bone.
Now he's got 2 fractures in the same limb. This is a femur, the upper thigh bone. With a fractured femur, there's no repair option.
Well, I asked Dr. Brownridge and Dr. Baker, and they said, they just kind of shook their head. And I said, let's do it.
The shock this week, though, was news of the death of one of the nation's current leading stallions, Alydar. The 15-year-old stallion fractured the cannon bone of his right rear leg after kicking his stall door last Tuesday night.
When the media asked the question, how did Alydar break his leg in the first place, the answer seemed simple enough.
He's a kind of horse that was rambunctious and could be mean at times, and liked to kick up his heels, literally.
Well, Alydar would throw a fit about once a month. You know, I guess the equivalent of a tantrum. And he was just a rough, mean horse.
He had a history of kicking his stall doors. Well, this night he apparently kicked it once too often. Somehow, in that space between that door and the wall of the stall, that hoof became entangled.
Some horses would have reacted to getting their foot caught by just waiting until the groom came by to get them loose. But that wasn't Alydar's temperament. And if he bent that the wrong direction, that would easily have snapped the limb.
When it was revealed that a Texas bank had threatened to foreclose on Calumet Farm less than 3 weeks before Alydar's death, many in the racing community began to question the circumstances surrounding his fatal injury.
Alydar was the highest insured horse in the world when he had to be put down.
A couple of years before Alydar's death, they kept on needing more and more cash, so they kept on selling seasons in Alydar out into the future and using the cash to operate on their daily basis.
You borrow more money, you give away more breeding rights. You've overextended the horse to so much now that you can't get out. There's no way out.
Insured for $36.5 million, Alydar in death paid off $20.5 million to the bank and provided $16 million to Calumet Farm. But the mismanagement continued. In 1991, the greatest horse farm in history filed for bankruptcy, with debts totaling more than $120 million.
I think he was murdered. His insured value was probably about 30-some-odd million dollars more than he was actually worth. And so there was going to be no more of his future sold, that there was no more cash to be flowing. It was done.
So it became, which was the greater need? Was it the need to preserve the cash cow, or was it to secure money to pay the insurance premiums? The choice in some people's mind was that they just used the death of the horse to collect the insurance, to float the farm along for another couple of years.
I always thought he was still worth more alive than dead. Even though a lot of the Calumet people then were bad guys, okay, I still think that somewhere deep inside them, having been around horses, they wouldn't do something like that. So when they say they think it was an accident, that's what I believe.
In my own heart, I think that there was something very nefarious about Alydar's death. Just too many things that happened. The night watchman, the regular night watchman, was relieved of his duties that night. Those stall doors, which weigh thousands of pounds, mysteriously was open just this far so the horse could get his leg in and break his leg. Just too many things.
The horrible part of it was whatever happened, and I guess we will never know for sure, but I think everyone feels that this wonderful horse wound up being the ultimate cost of that whole fiasco.
Although J.T. Lundy and one of his associates have served time in jail for bribery and fraud, no charges were ever brought in the death of Alydar. The case remains open.
Dr. Larry Bramlage is respected as one of the finest veterinarians in the business, and he's a man of utmost integrity. His statements are the strongest thing the Calumet people have going in their corner.
It's been proposed that someone broke his limb with a crowbar. Let me give you the biggest reason why I believe that that doesn't hold water. Even if someone was holding the horse for you, when you make a sudden motion like swinging a crowbar, the horse is going to be wary on the right hind limb. You wouldn't have got a clean shot there.
For J.T. Lundy, neither lawyers nor veterinarians have been able to clear his name.
Talk about a fall from grace. Here's a guy who at one time in his life had more money than he knew what to do with. I was down in Florida. I drove over to Lundy's place, and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Look at me. What do you think? How do you think I'm doing?"
I think that JT basically got in over his head. I've always believed that if he knew, he really didn't want it to happen. I think that he was swept into very, very strong forces of evil.
If it was ever proven that the horse was killed for insurance purposes, it would be a very dark day for our business.